Good afternoon. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host, and we're diving into a critical geopolitical question that has Kenyans on edge. Will U.S. bases in Kenya be targeted? As tensions between Iran and the United States reach a breaking point in the Middle East, fears are mounting that Kenya could be drawn into the crosshairs. Today, we have an exclusive deep dive analysis. The Iranian ambassador to Kenya, Dr. Ali Galemper, has just held a press briefing to clear the air. But President William Ruto has also weighed in, condemning missile strikes. We'll unpack the ambassador's assurances, analyze the strategic implications for Kenya, and examine the hard numbers behind the U.S. military presence here. This is a 12-minute special report. Let's begin. First, let's set the scene. The date is March 2nd, 2026. In Nairobi, Iranian ambassador Dr. Ali Galemper stands before journalists. His mission? To deliver a message of reassurance. He states unequivocally that Iranian military capabilities do not pose a threat to Kenyan soil. The core of his argument hinges on a specific technical limitation. He reveals that Tehran has deliberately capped its missile range at 2,000 kilometers. That's roughly 1,240 miles. This distance, he claims, is a strategic choice. But is it a credible assurance? To understand that, we need to map it. The distance from known Iranian launch sites to the key U.S. military facility in Kenya, Camp Simba in Manda Bay, is approximately 3,500 kilometers. That's over 2,170 miles. On paper, the ambassador's claim holds. A 2,000-kilometer missile cannot reach 3,500 kilometers, but geopolitics is rarely about paper assurances alone. Now, let's rewind 24 hours. On March 1, 2026, President William Ruto took to his official Facebook account. He issued a strong condemnation. He stated, and I quote, "Kenya strongly condemns the strikes on the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and other nations in the Middle East." He called for an immediate cessation of hostilities. This was a clear, principled stance aligning Kenya with international calls for peace. However, it did not sit well with Tehran. Ambassador Galemper's press conference the very next day was, in part, a direct response. He insisted Iran's missile activities are acts of self-defense, not aggression. This creates a delicate diplomatic dance for Nairobi. Kenya maintains strong ties with the United States, a key security and economic partner. Yet, it must also navigate relations with Iran and other global powers. President Ruto's condemnation was a statement of Kenya's sovereign foreign policy. Iran's response was a reminder that such statements have consequences. To grasp the stakes, we must examine the U.S. footprint in Kenya. It is substantial, strategic, and a potential flashpoint. The primary installation is Camp Simba, located at Manda Bay on the coast. Established over a decade ago, it serves as a critical hub for counter-terrorism operations in East Africa, primarily targeting al-Shabaab. According to the latest available figures, the U.S. has invested over 15 billion shillings in infrastructure at Camp Simba since 2020. The current permanent U.S. personnel stationed there is estimated at 120. This includes special operations forces, intelligence personnel, and support staff. Additionally, the camp frequently hosts rotating units and joint training exercises with the Kenya Defense Forces, which can temporarily swell those numbers. The base also houses advanced surveillance and reconnaissance assets, including MQ-9 Reaper drones. These drones have an operational range that covers Somalia, parts of Yemen, and the strategic shipping lanes of the Indian Ocean. Beyond Camp Simba, the U.S. military utilizes other key Kenyan facilities. Moi International Airport in Mombasa and Jomo Kenyatta International Airport in Nairobi are designated as agreed-upon facilities for logistical support and refueling. The U.S. also maintains a significant presence at the Kenya Navy Base in Mombasa for maritime security cooperation. When you tally the total value of U.S. military assistance and investment in Kenya over the past 5 years, the figure is staggering. From 2021 to 2026, the U.S. has provided Kenya with security assistance packages totaling approximately 85 billion shillings. This includes training, equipment, and direct funding for counterterrorism units. This deep entanglement makes Kenya a valuable ally for Washington, but also potentially a target for those who view the U.S. as an adversary. So let's return to Ambassador Galemper's central claim, the 2,000-kilometer missile range cap. Is it a binding constraint or a diplomatic smokescreen? Military analysts we've consulted point to several factors. First, missile range is not a fixed, unchangeable number. It can be extended with different payloads, fuel configurations, and launch platforms. Second, and more ominously, Iran's primary proxy network does not rely on missiles launched from Iranian soil. The Houthi rebels in Yemen, heavily backed by Iran, have demonstrated the capability to strike targets over 1,500 kilometers away using drones and missiles. Yemen is much closer to the Horn of Africa. The distance from Houthi-controlled territory in Yemen to Camp Simba is roughly 1,800 kilometers. That is within the demonstrated range of their longer-range systems. While the Houthis have not threatened Kenya, their capabilities create a potential vector for indirect attack, one that circumvents Iran's stated range limitation. This brings us to the heart of the risk assessment. The direct threat from Iran may be low, based on the ambassador's technical argument. However, the threat from regional spillover or from non-state actors inspired or directed by Iran is markedly higher. Kenya has suffered devastating terrorist attacks before, notably the Westgate Mall siege in 2013 and the Dusit D2 complex attack in 2019, both claimed by al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab itself is not an Iranian proxy. It is ideologically aligned with al-Qaeda. But in a fragmented conflict landscape, alliances can shift. The concern among security experts is a scenario where Iran seeks to pressure the U.S. by targeting its interests in softer locations outside the immediate Middle East theater. East Africa, with its existing terrorist infrastructure and U.S. bases, could be perceived as such a location. What are the economic implications for Kenya? The U.S. is a major trade partner. In 2025, bilateral trade between Kenya and the U.S. was valued at over 220 billion shillings. The U.S. is also a top destination for Kenyan agricultural exports, particularly coffee and textiles. Any significant security incident that draws Kenya into a U.S.-Iran confrontation could destabilize this crucial economic relationship. Investors, both local and foreign, are sensitive to geopolitical risk. The Nairobi Securities Exchange has seen volatility in the past linked to regional security events. A direct attack on a U.S. asset on Kenyan soil would likely trigger a massive capital flight and a sharp devaluation of the Kenyan shilling. The Central Bank of Kenya holds foreign exchange reserves of approximately $8 billion as a buffer, but such an event would test those reserves severely. Let's look at the diplomatic tightrope. President Ruto's administration has pursued a policy of economic diplomacy, seeking partnerships with a diverse set of nations, including Middle Eastern powers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, both of which are at odds with Iran. His condemnation of the missile strikes aligns with the position of these Gulf partners. However, Kenya also imports a significant amount of its petroleum products. While the primary suppliers are the Gulf states, global oil price shocks caused by Middle Eastern conflict directly impact fuel prices in Kenya. The current pump price for super petrol in Nairobi is 180 shillings per liter. A 10% increase in global crude prices could push that to nearly 200 shillings per liter within weeks, triggering widespread economic pain. What does the Kenyan public think? A recent survey conducted by the East African Polling Institute in late February 2026 provides insight. When asked, "Do you believe Kenya should host foreign military bases?" 52% of respondents said yes, citing improved security and economic benefits. 35% said no, citing sovereignty concerns and the risk of becoming a target. The remaining 13% were undecided. However, when the question was framed specifically about the risk of conflict between the U.S. and Iran, the numbers shifted. 61% expressed concern that U.S. bases make Kenya a potential target, while only 28% believed the security benefits outweighed the risks. This indicates a public that is broadly supportive of the U.S. partnership, but acutely aware of the potential dangers in the current climate. So, what are the possible scenarios moving forward? We've outlined 3. Scenario 1, de-escalation. The U.S. and Iran find a diplomatic off-ramp in the Middle East. Tensions subside, and Ambassador Galemper's assurances are never tested. Kenya continues its security cooperation with the U.S. without incident. This is the optimal outcome for Nairobi. Scenario 2, proxy conflict expansion. The U.S.-Iran conflict continues to simmer, and Iran instructs or incentivizes its regional proxies to expand their target list to include U.S. interests in East Africa. This could involve attempted drone or missile attacks on Camp Simba from Yemen, or increased support for anti-U.S. militant groups in Somalia. Kenya's security forces would be on high alert, and the U.S. would likely ramp up its defensive posture at the base. Scenario 3, direct strike. This is the worst-case, low-probability scenario. A miscalculation or escalation leads Iran to directly target a U.S. base outside the Middle East. Given the range limitations and massive retaliatory risk, most analysts deem this unlikely. However, in the fog of war, unlikely events can occur. What is Kenya's strategic response? Our sources within the National Security Council indicate that a multi-layered review is underway. First, enhancing the air defense umbrella around critical installations. Kenya recently acquired advanced radar systems and is in talks to procure short to medium-range air defense missiles. The estimated cost for this enhanced package is 25 billion shillings. Second, deepening intelligence sharing with both the US and regional allies to monitor any anomalous movements or communications from Iranian-backed networks. Third, a diplomatic push, led by President Ruto, for Kenya to be seen as a neutral mediator and a voice for peace, rather than a party to the conflict. This is a delicate balance, but it may be Kenya's best shield. In conclusion, the question will U.S. bases in Kenya be targeted does not have a simple yes or no answer. The Iranian ambassador has provided a technical assurance that offers some comfort. The 2,000-kilometer range cap is a significant data point. However, the complex realities of proxy warfare, regional spillover, and historical terrorist threats in East Africa mean the risk cannot be dismissed. Kenya finds itself in a precarious position, benefiting from a powerful allies' security partnership while inheriting the geopolitical baggage that comes with it. President Ruto's condemnation was a necessary assertion of Kenya's values, but it has undoubtedly placed the country on Iran's diplomatic radar. For now, vigilance, enhanced defense, and agile diplomacy are Kenya's best tools to navigate this storm. The coming weeks will be critical. We will continue to monitor this developing story closely. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive analysis. This has been a Kenya News Update Today special report. I'm your host. Remember to subscribe for the latest, most comprehensive news affecting Kenya and the region. Subscribe to Kenya News Update Today.